There we go. A little delay there on the getting started. So, good evening, everyone. Hope all is well in your world. Having a nice warm day here in Colorado, and our neighbor across the street last week had a house fire, so that was very exciting in our neighborhood. Not exciting for them, unfortunately. So we're trying to help them out a little bit. So we're hoping. It sounds like they're going to have to be out of their house for a while, which we're experienced with because we had that happen to us about 20 years ago. So not a lot of fun. But anyway, hopefully everyone's having a great day. I'm going to bring my guest up here. I'm excited to talk with her tonight, and we'll bring her up here. And we have Lynda Williams. Hi, Lynda. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
Great here in Colorado. So you're living up in Canada. What's the weather like right now?
We got up to 13 degrees today, which is highly unusual for November.
13 degrees is unusual, as
Yeah.
in cold. That's a warm day.
It's a warm day, yes. I should say 13 degrees Celsius.
Celsius. Okay. I was gonna say, yeah, us Americans, we can't go with the metric system. We have to do our own craziness. So 13's not too bad. So
Not
at
at
least
all.
it's above freezing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Good. So yeah, there's a BoucherCon is being held in Calgary in next year in 2026, and I was wondering, and they're holding it towards the end of October, and I'm like, what's the weather going to be like? It seems like a bad time of year to. I mean, it's probably not too bad, but it's not like the middle of winter, but still.
October is pretty unpredictable. Yeah. I mean, winter can start before Halloween, and sometimes it's like an extension of summer. You never know.
Yeah, well, we're hoping to go. We'll see how things are in the world when we get to that point. But my wife and I would like to, because we'd love to go to Calgary, and we wish it was held a little more towards like summer, but that's okay. We'll deal with it. Flying out of Colorado in late October can be a challenge as well because we have lots of weather issues ourselves this time of year. So, but anyway, please tell us a little about yourself, personal things, things important that people need to know about you.
All right. Well, my name is Lynda Williams, and I'm a short fiction writer. I'm also an occasional freelance proofreader and copy editor to keep me out of trouble when the short stories aren't going so well. And I love to do gluten-free baking in my spare time. I have celiac disease, so unfortunately, the baking has to be gluten-free. My husband and I have lived in Calgary for many years now, and we have an Australian shepherd son.
Oh, wow. So we used to have a Black Lab Australian Shepherd mix years ago.
Lovely.
Had the little short stubby tail with everything, and great dog. That was Ashley was her name, and she was a rescue. So you're a big pet person. Have you had dogs all your lives?
Absolutely. I grew up on a dairy farm, so there were always lots of cats and dogs. Yeah, just can't imagine my life without them.
Yeah, we've always had pets. We had cats for a long time, but my wife's allergic, and she kind of got away from having cats. And of course, a lot of them like to be outside a lot too. So it's like,
Yeah.
which of course the dogs do as well. So you have a big place for the dog to run.
We've got a fenced-in backyard, yeah,
Yeah,
so we're very fortunate that way.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So do you work full time? Or are you pretty much try to spend your time writing?
I am a freelancer, and I left a career in peer support to pursue the writing life, which, yeah, it was the global pandemic that pushed me in that direction. We got all that extra time, I guess you would say, and I found myself baking and doom scrolling. And while I was scrolling through Twitter and Instagram, I saw that a lot of people were using their time to write, and many of these people were getting published. And it made me jealous in the best way possible. And that was, I guess, the turning point for me because I had collected all these stories over the years that I tucked away in a drawer and kind of given up on the publishing aspect of writing just because there is so much rejection involved, and I decided my skin wasn't necessarily thick enough, to take it seriously, but yeah, the pandemic happened, and I decided it was get tough or die.
Yeah, the pandemic changed a lot of stuff for all of us. So, what do you find? What do you do hobby wise to try to do outside of
Um,
writing?
I think anything you do that's not with your head is a good hobby to have if you're a writer. So get some plants, work in the garden, go hiking, get a pet. That sort of thing is, to me, important because when you're working with your hands, whether you're rolling a pie crust or chopping carrots and onions for soup, you're you're doing something physical that puts you back in your body. Sometimes I feel like my head is this balloon on a string, and, sometimes that balloon tries to get away with you, right? And when things aren't working on the page, returning to something a little more physical can be grounding, and usually the answers come, when you're slicing up those onions and carrots.
Kind of get your mind on another thing, and then it unlocks your brain, and then all of a sudden, boom, it hits you.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
That's good. So, is that what you try to do to decompress then, as well as those type of things to get you out of those writing funks?
Yeah, the other thing for me, running water is a great thing. So, like, run a bath, go to a stream, or, if you're near a beach, listen to the waves. There's something about that that's very calming and grounding again, and the pieces of the puzzle seem to slip into place when you just I don't know, when you spend time in nature or yeah, for me, even a faucet running sometimes can help.
It's been a bad month when your water bill is high, huh?
That's right, there you go, hey?
So how long have you been writing? Is this something you've been doing kind of your whole life? When did you kind of get that bug to say, I'd like to write?
Well, I got my first byline when I was 13 years old, and that's a little bit of a funny story. It was just for a local newspaper, and they were looking for senior high school students to write articles covering what was going on at our school, and they couldn't find a senior student who was interested in doing it. Meanwhile, I was penning my sassy letters to the editor, which actually made it into print. So they knew I could write. And one night I got a phone call asking if, I might be interested in this opportunity. So for the next 2 years, I was a stringer for the newspaper. And it certainly misled me about how easy it is to get published. But it was a great experience.
The term stringer, I always love hearing that term. A lot of times, I don't know if there's true stringers anymore. I don't know. I mean, the newspaper industry is kind of in kind of chaos these days. So
Yeah.
yeah, unfortunately. So you've always kind of 13 is when you kind of got your first byline. So who are some authors that you like to read that kind of helped inspire you to be an author or to write?
Oh, at that point, I grew up in Quebec, in an Anglophone family. So my access to books, was a little bit limited. I had the school library. I burned through everything that interested me that they had very quickly, and that included some of the classics like Austen and Bronte. Um, but in the summers, especially, I didn't have access to English books. If I wanted to read, I had apple crates in the attic of Harlequin romances that my grandmother passed down to my mother. And, that's what was available, so that's what I read. And I'd be hard pressed to name an author besides Janet Daly now, because she was prolific, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, anything I could get my hands on at the time. Like when I was younger, Lucy Maud Montgomery, Anne of Green Gables, Emily of New Moon, all of that. Later, I studied English at university, and Steinbeck was in there, Salinger for sure. Raymond Carver was the one who turned me on to what short stories could do. And I loved that he did working class people, because that was something I missed throughout the survey of English literature. And coming from a working class background, I really wanted to hear those voices.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand. So, do you remember the first thing you said, the byline? But was there something beyond the byline that you wrote that you and the motivation behind writing it?
Um, the first letter to the editor that had me all fired up was about the 1996 referendum in Quebec, which, if you're south of us, you might not have heard of, but Quebec was looking at separating from Canada
Right,
based on language issues.
right.
So, being 12 years old at the time, I was old enough to have opinions about it, but I was not old enough to vote. So that's where that came from. And just seeing that in print, though, was very empowering, right? It made me feel like, yes, I can have a voice, even if I can't vote for 6 years.
Yeah, I do remember that, and I remember that being a big deal. And how close was that to coming to pass? So was it kind of a narrow margin? It obviously never happened. It didn't happen, but
Extremely narrow. It was 49 to 51, I believe.
wow.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're getting a lot of that in this country these days. I mean, we've got counties here in Colorado that are talking about they want to go to Wyoming because we're too liberal in some areas and they're more conservative and all that. And I'm like, it's just that all that we all, I can't seem to find any common ground. And obviously, I'm sure you hear about all the political discourse that we're going through in this country these days, which is pretty crazy right now. So um, and Canada and our relationships with Canada. We used to have a great relationship, and now it's
Still stuff.
not so good anymore. That's why I want to go to Calgary, but I'm like, okay, I want to see how things are when we get going to that. So, and I read a little bit that you like to listen to music while you write. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm a bit of a broken record person, in the sense that when I'm working on a story, there's usually a song for me that's kind of like the anthem for it. And I'll play that on repeat, because often what I'm reaching for in terms of emotion is captured by that song. So it's not that I have a playlist while I'm working, it's that there is one song and I'm just hitting the repeat button over and over.
So that song, you obviously were a fan of that song in the past, and that song somehow inspired you to say, I want to write this story that kind of borrows a little bit from that song, or how did that work for you?
Um, Often what will happen is the voice of a character will come to me first, and then I'll go searching for the song that captures what I'm reaching
Oh,
for.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the characters first, and then there you match kind of a song to it, and that song kind of inspires you. That's
yeah.
interesting because I can't listen to anything while I'm writing, not at
Oh,
all. It's just like, so is it playing pretty loud usually when you're playing, or is it kind of just softly playing?
mostly softly. I do play with the volume some.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I start to get, I guess you would say, really on a roll, then the volume goes down a little bit. And when I get stuck, the volume goes up a little bit.
That's interesting. I think that's interesting way to write. So, all right. So, tell us about your book. It's The Beauty and the Hell of It and Other Stories. So, it's a collection of short stories. So, give us an idea of some of the stories that are in there and what they're about.
Yeah, so I like to tell people the book is my response to the loveliness imperative. And what I mean when I say the loveliness imperative is all the pressure we place on women to make themselves appealing to men in everything they do, right? Don't argue. If you sneeze, be dainty about it. Just, it's something that you're trained to do when you're so young, but it amounts to making yourself small. And that can really catch up with you later in life. And I think there's turning points or moments when you have to push back on this if you're going to be true to who you are. So the book is a collection of stories capturing women during these moments of pushing back. And they're at turning points already. They're going through grief, loss, trauma. We have an assault, there's a rape in there. Yeah, so it's just women pushing back on the expectations about how long they get to grieve, about how much space they get to take up when they do grieve.
Yeah, those are interesting stories. Obviously, being a man, I don't have those things, but yeah, those it's amazing the pressures that are put on women, pressures that are put on, and men put pressures on themselves too.
That's
Some of it's external, some of it's internal. Like you said, you're kind of brought up that way. Did you feel like that was kind of the way you were brought up as well, and that's kind of how you have been able to break out of that? Is writing these stories?
absolutely. I have one brother and one sister, and the double standards in our family were very extreme.
Hmm.
And I don't know if part of that was just the legacy of having parents who grew up in the 50s and then being on a dairy farm with all of this very physical labor and that division of labor. Yeah, so all of that was entrenched very early on. And then writing gave me the opportunity to examine that, confront it, and put it behind me.
So did they on the dairy farm, the physical labor? Did there was like, oh, the boys need to do that and the girls are less so involved in those type of things?
Yeah, like there was my brother's 8 years older than me, so I can see that, I mean, some things fell to him being the oldest with that age gap. But, when I was in 2nd grade, my mother, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and our parents chose to tell him, and he actually left school at the age of 15 to help on the farm, but they didn't tell my sister and I because they thought we were too young. So when I think about, what he carried on his shoulders at such a young age, right? And
Right.
then that we just got to be kids and we didn't even realize that my mom was, you know, in this precarious position. It's a
Yeah.
hard thing to reconcile, right? But
Yeah.
of course, he was interested in the farm too, in a way that I was only interested in books. So when I look back, I also understand that my parents encouraged us to pursue our interests, right? Because he
Right.
was never encouraged to go get good grades at school. But my sister and I received much pressure to bring home A's and nothing below that. Um, there was the same, I mean, in the kitchen, he wasn't expected to do anything. And at the same time, if my mother wasn't there to make him breakfast, she would ask me to make sure that happened, right? Because
Right.
you come in from the barn and you're doing all that hard work, the least you can get is your meal, right?
So were they kind of expecting him to take over the family business as they got older and all that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And did he end up doing that?
Oh, he's still on the farm. Yeah. Yeah.
Still works on the farm. So they
Yeah.
kind of figured, well, education wasn't that important to in that case because he would be doing a lot of physical labor and he knew everything he needed to know about running a farm, so he didn't need much else. I'm guessing math or any of those things didn't really matter much. I guess.
Yeah. I think that was the line of thinking. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever had the desire to live on a farm as you've gotten older, or is that life is like, nope, that's not the life I want.
No, it was a hard life to leave, because I grew up in the same small town in the same house for 18 years, which I appreciate now is something that not a lot of kids can say to have that stability, right?
Yeah.
Um, but once I left, there was no looking back. I wanted a city humming around me, and it was very much for the opportunities. To connect with other writers and to have experiences that I wouldn't necessarily have living in a small town.
Yeah, making those connections is definitely a lot harder in a small town. Well, I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, which is not really a small town, but some people look at it and they think, "Oh, that's a small town. It was 180,000 people or whatever." But it's like in Iowa, that was not a small town. That was the metropolis of Iowa, you know.
Exactly, yeah.
So you write a lot of short stories, and I'm always intrigued by short stories because I'm kind of a wordy guy. So it's always interesting to me writing a short story. So why did you choose short stories as a medium for you to write in? And it's very difficult to sell short stories as well as you've experienced.
Yeah, and I came to short stories last. So I've always loved novels, and that's what was available to me for reading growing up. So I never really considered short stories much more than, I guess you would say, a punishment assigned by high school teachers, because they were so different from novels, and I didn't feel like I actually got what they were trying to do. So I remember there was this one short story called The Horses by Margaret Lawrence that was assigned 3 years running, and I skipped it until the 3rd year, and I thought, "You know what? This is just gonna haunt me until I finish it." And to this day, I'm not sure I understand what it was reaching for. Um, and because I love novels so much, when I was 17, I decided I would write one. And I took the very sound advice, to outline chapter by chapter. And once I'd done that, I got 140 pages into this work, and I realized something that's important and integral to my process. I'm a discovery writer. I stopped writing this book because I stopped caring at all about it because I already knew what would happen. My why for writing is to figure out what will happen.
Mhm.
So that was a great learning lesson. It certainly cost me some time. But moving forward from that, I didn't have the courage to attempt another novel because I felt like I'd failed at it, even though I'd learned this. I wrote poetry all throughout high school. I submitted to journals, and in university, I took a creative writing class. I was one of 2 writers who was writing poetry in a room of short story writers, and I still wasn't convinced that short stories were for me. And then Raymond Carver happened, and it was just like, "Wow, this is cool." And at the same time as I was writing poetry in this class, my very wise creative writing teacher recommended a collection of stories called Cowboys Are My Weakness by Pam Houston. And I read that, and wow, it was the first story collection I'd ever seen by a single author that I just loved every story in the book. And I read it over and over the way I listened to music. And yeah, that became a goal for me in my mid-20s, I would say. And that's when I realized that maybe I couldn't write novels. Maybe I was a crappy poet, but there was something here. The first short story I wrote, I submitted to a contest. I won. Best prize ever. It wasn't money, it was mentorship. And yeah, that set me on a path because it taught me how to think about revision. Up to that point, I was a first draft writer. I loved discovering the ideas, but I didn't really know how to make them better. I was writing, you had to revise your work in school all the time, but I saw myself changing it without necessarily making it better. And that's what I saw when I rewrote stuff creatively. And my lovely mentor taught me what questions to ask, what to think about when I was returning to a story. And yeah, that just gave me an appetite, for the short story and for the compression and the collapsing that goes into it. I feel like this is a very long answer to a succinct
No,
question.
no, it's a good answer because it's interesting because that's one of the things I was talking about. Do you have one of the questions I was going to ask is, do you have a word count in mind when you're writing? Because obviously, it's easy to get large, but then I'm sure you have to do editing, and you go, well, this is too big. I need to bring it down some, and there's some stuff you got to cut out.
Absolutely, and Because I've been writing with an eye to Canadian markets and Canadian competitions for so long, I almost have this internal meter. When I'm approaching 2,500 words, there's this little voice in me saying, wrap it up. Because a lot of Canadian competitions and even literary journals cap at 2,500 words, which is very short. But the reasoning behind that is you can feature more writers at 2,500 words. Like you can have a 10,000 word story and feature one writer or feature four writers in that space. So often they cap very tight just to get out as many emerging voices as it can. So, yes, 2,500 words is my magic word count.
So, have there been times when you've written something, it's like, I just can't get it down to that level, this, and you just got, I got to throw this idea out and start with something new?
Um, I don't throw those ideas out. There is one story in the collection that runs just under 5,000 words,
Hmm.
and that is the longest story I have ever written. And yeah, I pitched it to a lot of American markets just because there's not a lot of places I could send it in Canada.
Hmm.
And yeah, I do try to give the story as much room as it's asking to be told. So I have a few stories in the collection that run towards 3,500 words. And you can still find markets for those in Canada, less so for big competitions like the CBC Short Story Prize.
So, what do you think is key in developing a short story and keeping that word count in that area? Is there, you think there's any magic thing, or is it just you just develop it as you're going along, like you said?
You know, I think one of the important things to think about when you're revising, because for sure in the first draft, I'm just making it up as I go along. But when I'm looking at what to keep and what to cut, I'm trying to make the words do a couple things at a time, right? That you're advancing plot and revealing character or theme with a single sentence, right? Like when you think about what details you're including, they need to count. They
Right.
can't just be an observation because that doesn't matter. It has to be more than that,
Yeah, that's interesting because for me, 2,500 words is some of my chapters. So, yeah, it's
right?
like I can have dialogue sometimes that goes 2,500 words. So, it's very impressive to be able to pare that down and still make the point that you want to make in the story.
Yeah.
So, what else? So, you've got the this new book. So, are any of these ideas in this book, are they based on true events in your life or other people's lives, things like that as well?
Yes. A couple of the stories are based on things that are quite close to what happened to me. And then I thought, well, what would it be like if I threw this event into a fictional world and invented characters around that world and let it play out in a way that might be more empowering than what
Mhm.
happened to me? So there's one story in the collection that's written in second person. And in my late 20s, I was assaulted, and I actually lost my writing voice for about 10 months in there, where I just I was committed to writing. Every weekend, I would take myself to the same coffee shop and I would write the same words over and over because I was trying to free write. And when you get stuck, you just keep writing that sentence, right? Except nothing else would come. And then returning to my favorite story collection by Pam Houston, I think the first story in that collection is called How to Talk to a Hunter. And it's written in second person. And that was the story that inspired me to go back and write about this assault in second person to remove myself from it. And that just made the whole thing so much easier. And I call it my vindication story because once I'd finished it, I sent it out to a competition, got an honorable mention. I know why it didn't win when I look back on it. It was not polished enough to send out, but
Mhm.
just getting that little nod was like, okay, you're a writer again. You're back in the saddle.
So, did you find that therapeutic then when you were writing that? I mean, obviously, it's difficult to write about stuff like that that happened to yourself.
Absolutely, because it was something I was honestly stuck in, right? Like, the words were stuck in my throat, so being able to get the entire narrative down was just this weight off my chest. It was healing. It allowed me to move forward, I think, quite literally.
Great. So, what do you got? What are you working on next? You've got some more short stories. I'm sure you've got some short stories you've written that maybe you haven't put in book form yet as well. You probably got a big filing cabinet full of a lot of different stories you've written through the years.
Um, I wouldn't say it's full. An interesting thing happens when you finish a collection and you move on to more writing in the same form. So I've been writing stories since finishing this book. And the funny thing about them is many of them seem to be trying to fit into the theme of the last collection.
Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges I think that just happens naturally when you've been gathering work around a theme for so long.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to write, and focusing on is gathered around the theme of betrayals. And that's been interesting, right? To think about how we betray each other, but we also betray ourselves, the planet. So that's been fun. But the last story I wrote for that collection, I shared with a writer friend. And she said, this works on the story level, but it also contains a novel, which you can imagine I'm not excited to hear. But I also feel like I might owe these characters an attempt. I mean, you know what? I never finished the last novel, but I sure did learn from it. So, what can I lose from trying again, right?
And do you think that not, if you decide to do that, you do it more in a pantser style where you would just kind of just run with it and not outline it like you did the first time, which you felt like kind of restricted you? And
Well, what I've learned in the intervening time is a lot of pantsers still use beats. I'd never heard of story beats until recently. And I thought about that and I was like, yeah, I can commit to understanding that much about the story. If I spend, 1,500 words outlining a chapter and I haven't written that chapter, I think for me, knowing the way I write, that's a waste. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't go back to that. But I think knowing the beats is just that little headlamp that you can work with in front of you, right?
Yeah, I'm a total pantser myself, so I know
Oh,
what you're saying. I agree with what you say. I'm kind of discovering the story with the characters a lot of times is what I'm doing. So
right.
it's just like everyday life. You walk out the door, you don't know what's going to happen, and something happens in front of you, or in my case, private eye and crime and stuff. There are
Yeah.
things, and a lot of times they're discovering their I'm discovering with them as I go along on that case and everything. So I find that enjoyable. Sometimes you can write yourself into corners as well, and you can get yourself down into rabbit holes, but that's the challenge. And sometimes you have to work your way out of it, or you backtrack a little bit and fix what you like. So I think that for you, it sounds like that's a good process for you to get your stories written.
Absolutely. And I mean, to date, I've written myself out of every corner I've backed myself into. So,
It was funny. Well, I was Killer Nashville is a big event that's done in Nashville, Tennessee every year, and I was there, and I was a moderator on a panel with a bunch of pantsers, and we were talking about that, and it was always interesting hearing everyone about how that they have kind of that same thing, and the characters are sometimes sitting there in the room with you as you're riding along. I don't know if you experience that as well. So
100%. Yeah, it's the thrill of it, right?
yeah, it is. So then, so you're talking about maybe you've got something there you might try to turn into a novel. So, but you've got another collection of short stories that you're kind of working on. You said it was kind of dealing with betrayal. Are some of those based on true stories as well, or people you know as well?
No, this time it's all made up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess when I look back on my 20s, they were eventful. I thoroughly enjoyed my misspent youth, made a lot of questionable decisions. So a lot of the stories in The Beauty and the Hell of It were reflecting back on that time. My 30s were very tame. Um, I guess it was the hangover from those 20s. So I have less to reflect back on now, in terms of misadventures.
Yeah, if I were to write about my life, it would be very boring. So I was never much of a problem child or anything. So my wife's a different story. She got in trouble. I should probably write some stories from her point of view someday. So obviously, short stories are a challenge to get published, and I think you tried to get traditionally published, or maybe you didn't. You just felt like this is just too much work. So your works now are like hybrid. Are you self published? How are you published?
I published with a small traditional publisher based out of Ontario, Canada. And it was a goal for me, to be traditionally published just to prove to myself that I could do it, but also because I know I'm not a business person. There's a whole aspect of writing that you have to start thinking about, if you're gonna self-publish that you don't necessarily have to handle if you go with a traditional publisher, right? Because
Mhm.
there is an in-house publicist. I have an external publicist as well. But then there's things like the layout and the cover that you're on your own for, and you're gonna have to think about editing services and proofreading, and I'm not good at juggling a lot of balls. I am a creative person, and that's where I shine, and I really wanted to just focus on craft. And I decided if I just kept working on the craft aspect, maybe, just maybe, I could find that traditional publisher.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the patience for it myself. I'm totally self-published as well, but you're right. There's a lot of things you have to do self-published, or you pay people to do them for you, and there isn't always a lot of money to do that. So that's always
Right.
the challenge. So so you have a publicist. I know Mickey, which, that's how we connected was through Mickey. I'm assuming you don't have an agent then, because a lot of times to get published, you need an agent these days to get in front of the big publishing houses or even some of the small ones.
Yeah, and the challenge with finding an agent, if you write short stories, is they don't get paid unless you get paid. So short stories are a risk, and then your advance on a collection of short stories is probably not gonna be as good as on a novel. So there again, it's not encouraging, especially if they're looking at somebody who hasn't already published, right? Like, if you've got a few books out and you've got a collection of short stories they really believe in, well, okay, you've established yourself as a career writer. But if this is your first trick out of the hat, so to speak, and the only trick potentially, yeah, it's a hard sell, right? So I didn't even submit to agents.
Yeah. So this next book on betrayal, do you have an idea of when you think it'll be completed, or are you still working on some of the works?
Oh, I'm still working on it,
Yeah.
yeah. That's one thing I've had to accept with short stories. Sometimes because you're inventing a new set of characters and a new world for each one, I find I need a stewing period between them. It isn't that it takes that long to hammer one out. And, sometimes it does need time to sit in a drawer before you can attack your revisions. But diving into the next one right away can be really challenging because the risk is you're borrowing the same characters from the last one and just putting them in a different world.
Yes, that is a challenge. That's why mine are all series, so I like
There you
I have
go.
that continuity of characters and stuff. So yes, I'm impressed to be able to do it. So no, you haven't had any characters that have carried over to any of the short stories in any way?
In the collection, there are two that are linked. The other ones are all individual standalone, but there was a set of characters that um, just kind of beckoned to me, to keep going with. And so the one story is told from a woman's perspective, like the rest of the book, and the final story in the collection is told from a man's perspective, who's also in the earlier story.
And what kind of time frame are your short stories? Are they modern times? Do you sometimes go back in time? You know, where are the settings at as well?
Okay, so the stories were all contemporary when I wrote them, but because some of them date back to like 2010, 2012, I can't really call them contemporary anymore, right? A lot has happened since then. But they are near contemporary.
Yeah, the time. So are you one of those that tries to write every day? Are you a diligent writer?
I am not an everyday. If I'm in the middle of a story, it just haunts me, and everything I should be getting done isn't getting done. Like there's nothing else. But once I've traverse that phase and there's a draft and it's in a drawer, then I need to sink my teeth into life and start observing the world around me and taking in details and thinking about ideas for another story. And I could free write at my desk if I wanted, but I like to be out in the world or at least living my life to do that, if it makes sense.
Sure. Don't want to be chained to the desk all the time, right? You gotta
Yeah.
experience it, and that helps you get ideas sometimes too. I mean, when you're out in the world.
Yeah.
So your characters in your book. So you're always writing new characters each time. How are you trying to keep track of those? I'm sure it's like, names and everything. Do you have some like little notebook that you're keeping track of all that? I mean, I know you don't outline and stuff, but I would think you've got to be careful. Or did you just have one of those minds where you can keep it all up here, and you know that character, you haven't had that character before?
Well, I thought I had it all up there, and then when it came time to prepare the manuscript to send out, I realized that a couple of my minor characters did have the same names.
Yeah,
So I had to go through the manuscript and really look at, okay, where have I overlapped? But also in terms of describing details, like a facial feature or something. Did you pull this one before, Linda? You
right.
do really have to be careful.
Yeah, because I'm sure. And how many characters are usually in your short stories? Does it vary? I mean, I'm assuming in a short story, you're not going to have, 20, 30 characters a lot of times, but it's a small.
No. Um, 2 or 3 is what I try to limit it to, and then maybe there's, 1 or 2 floating around the periphery just because they're necessary, but they're not developed, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, when you're writing to 2,500 words, you need your protagonist and antagonist, and maybe there's somebody else in there to create a triangle of some sort, but boy, there's not a lot of room to have extensive characters.
And I imagine that usually the setting doesn't change much either in the story, right? It's usually in one location or maybe one or two locations when you're doing such a short story as well.
Yeah, it's often, in a very confined setting over a short period of time. Yeah.
So we've talked about that. So when ideas come up for a story, and are you one of those that's like something just pops in your head and go, well, this make a good story? Do you write them down somewhere, or they file them away, or what? Obviously going out in the world and experiencing them, and where do you feel like they come from most of the time?
I wish I knew where they come from.
They're just floating around in the universe, and somehow you just pick them out of the air.
Yeah, it often starts as that line bouncing around in my head that won't leave me alone, and then that forces me either to a scrap of paper, usually or even a napkin or my notes app. Like, opening a Word document for me is something I do when the story is already half written. I'm not willing to commit to the event of a story, too early on. I guess I'm trying to convince myself out of imposter syndrome by making it seem unimportant. I'll just have a play with this character, let's see what she has to say. And then there's a point where I feel the plot starting to come together, and it's like, okay, you can type this in a Word document. You're not going to buckle underneath it.
So, is there anywhere you traveled to or visited that inspired anything that you've written?
I can't say that travel has inspired me. I mean, I've been lucky enough to travel a little bit across the continent. And honestly, probably some of the most interesting traveling I did was when I moved from Quebec to Calgary. I took the Greyhound. So that's like a 42-hour bus trip.
Wow.
Yeah, I made that trip a few times, going back to visit my family. And, you know, bus stations are an interesting place to hang out. And yeah, I mean, it's Greyhound is gone, at least here in Canada. It was an interesting moment, and it does inspire me to look back at certain locations. Like, I remember the bus breaking down outside of Brandon, Manitoba. I don't know if I'd know where Brandon, Manitoba is if it wasn't for that breakdown, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time on a bus.
It is, yeah, and I mean, you get off that bus, it's the best shower of your life.
I always think of, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with Steve Martin and them, and they ride on the bus, and he turns to him and he says, "Have you ever ridden on a bus before?" And he goes, "No." And he says, "Well, your mood's not going to improve any." So
Yeah, that is
he
pretty
was
apt,
already in a bad mood from everything that was happening. Yeah.
yeah.
So, so, how do you think your writing has changed through the years? Do you think
Oh,
it's evolved? Do you think it's gotten better? Uh, what do you think has gotten better for you? And you haven't you've been writing a good chunk of your life, but different types of writing.
yeah, and you're right that different types is it's interesting because I consider writing to be a ladder you're moving up in terms of growth. And I do think as you move higher on the ladder, the rungs get farther and farther apart. So you definitely see more progress at the beginning. And having moved ladders from newspaper writing to poetry to attempted novels to short stories, I was able to carry over some things. I do actually see that having to be concise, in terms of poetry and newspaper writing built a foundation for me as a short story writer, in a way that even though novels are also fiction, didn't prepare me for short stories. Um, as I get farther along with short stories, I think one of the areas I've grown in a lot and continue to grow in is subtext. It's not something I thought about at all when I was revising in my earlier stories. And now I do consider it, right? And I don't think it's something you can handle in your early drafts, right? I know there are if you look online and research subtext because you want to learn about it, there's not a lot available. There are a few exercises supposedly generated to help you with subtext. But the thing is, you can't write a first draft with an eye to subtext. It's something you reflect on and build after. And often for me, it comes from taking words out. um, it can be inviting a third thing into a conversation. So sometimes when you have characters who are talking at cross purposes and they can't say what they really want to say to each other, they talk about something else. Maybe it's a flower arrangement, and then they dump the emotion that they're feeling towards each other on that third object or thing. That's not something I ever considered in earlier stories. Charles Baxter has an entire book on subtext that I would highly recommend if anybody's thinking about that. Yeah, I don't. know if you're ever really conscious of how you're improving while you're improving. It's always something you notice looking back. Like, when I look at my collection of stories now, to me, it reads like a first collection, which is fine. I needed to get my first collection out so I could write the next one.
Yeah, when you read your old stuff, you sometimes go, and then it's like, well, do I go back and revise it and try to make it better? But it's like, well, that's the past, and
Yeah.
it was
And it's
good enough then, and now we're doing better. The new stuff I'm concentrating on as much as anything else. It's always interesting. People ask me, well, what's your favorite book, favorite thing you wrote, and I always find that challenging because when you're
Honest.
writing anything you're writing now is usually your favorite. I would say that's what
Yeah.
you're working on, right? That's what you like, and as soon as you're done with it, then you're on to the next one. So maybe you experience the same thing if people ask you that question as well.
Yeah, my favorite story is always the most recent one, right?
Yeah, you're learning from that. So is there something we talked about a little bit about the novel possibly working, but is there something you want to write that you haven't written yet that you think, well, I'd love to, maybe a different genre, different. Uh,
Well, the novel would be stepping into something different for me because it would be a romance for the end of civilization.
oh,
Yeah. So it harkens back to the Harlequins I cut my teeth on,
oh,
but it's also me saying no to all of the tropes of romance. So that's a fun thing to play with, right?
yeah. Looking forward to hearing about that one when it comes out. So I always ask everyone. The name of the show is Bringing Life to Characters. So I always ask this question: what is it you do to get those characters to get them to jump off the page? It's a little bit harder in a short story, I think, because you don't have a lot of space to get those characters to pop. But you may have some secrets, or what you think you try to do to get them to stand out on that page.
Dialogue helps me a lot. And that's one of the things sometimes I have to cut when I'm revising forward count. Some conversations between characters are really about me getting to know them. And then they do come through stronger on the page because I've known them through that conversation. Does that conversation always move the story forward in a way that's relevant? No, that's often why I have to cut it. But I think dialogue has a way of distilling conflict and your character's desires, right? Like, I've been told no matter how well you know your character, like, you can do an entire chart and file for them, but you need to know what they want, what they are hiding. Those are the 2 main ones, right? What they want, what they're hiding in terms of just having that motivation nailed, and dialogue is a great way to discover that because it's easy to forget about the desires and the motivations of lesser characters, I find, and I think maybe it was Ray Bradbury who said that your character should always want something even if it's only a glass of water. You need that tension, right? And for me, I'll often write dialogue that is just talking heads, and some of that might make it into the story, and then I'll give it more than talking heads, but just having the talking heads experience for Lynda with her characters, that's my quality time with them. For me, that's breathing life into them.
Okay, great answer. So awards you've won with your books. I know we've got a picture here.
Yeah, so that is the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta Emerging Artist Award. And it's an interesting award because it's not just for writers. What happens is it's offered every other year, and they're looking at any emerging artist in their field. So you could be a visual artist, a sculptor, a dancer, a pianist, a playwright, and yeah, you apply for this with a portfolio. And then if you are very fortunate, yeah, you are one of 10 individuals selected.
And what is there like a cash award for that or anything like that as well?
It's 10,000 cash, yes.
Oh wow. In Canadian money, that's just about as much as American money. So that's pretty nice. So yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah.
And then what advice do you have any advice for people who want to be authors in this great crazy business that we're in?
Um, if you want it, find yourself a support system, right? Find like-minded people who are passionate about writing, who are willing to offer you feedback and who will be there for you when you get rejected or to celebrate with you when good things do happen. But also, um, it's going to give you the opportunity to celebrate other people and their wins and to be there for them when they're struggling. And then the other thing I would say is figure out how to cope with rejection. Because, I mean, it doesn't tickle ever, but for some people, that means setting a rejection goal because it is part of the process, right? So if you decide that, I'm going to rack up 100 rejections this year, your batting average will shift. There will be some acceptances in there too. It's a numbers game a lot of the time. It's not always personal. For sure, use your support network to make sure your work is ready before you send it out. But yeah, I would say those two things. Plan for the rejection, have a coping strategy, and surround yourself with like-minded people.
Do you have ARC readers, early readers, beta readers, people that read your stuff as you're writing, or even when you think it's complete?
I do. And interestingly enough, for this particular collection, my mother was the first reader for most of the stories. She was the one who inspired my love of reading. And then coming through the program at Humber Polytechnic, I met other writers who often do I think this is ready, but I'm not sure review of my work.
So we talked a little bit about it. You don't really like the marketing side. Do you have any marketing tips other than hire someone to help you?
Well, I think my tip is to know yourself, right? So if you are like me and you know you don't have a head for it, budget for and enlist that help. Um, but there's different ways to go about it, right? Some people have a lot of success on TikTok. Some people find their people on Facebook, right? A lot of it is throwing sugar at the wall to see what sticks. You got to be
Sugar
willing.
at the wall. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I mean, you've got to be willing to try stuff.
So, do you have any events that you're going to be doing going forward this year, promoting the book? It came out this year, right? The book, it was a fairly recent release.
Yes, it came out September 1st, and then I had a launch in Calgary in the middle of September. And coming up on December 7th, I have a group launch with my publisher in Toronto. And then I'll be doing another reading at the Wolf's Voices series here in Calgary in February.
And then you don't have a website. You have a landing page, which I forgot to copy here, so I'm quickly doing that real quick so we can throw it up on the screen because I still have the one from my last guest, which doesn't do you any good. There we
Yeah.
go.
The landing page has links to some of the stories that were published in journals that are still live online. So if you're wondering, well, what kind of stories are these? Go have a look, right?
Yeah, and I found there's a couple other Lynda Williams out there too. So when I was looking for you, spelled the same with the Y and everything. So yeah, I'm sure that's always a challenge as well to distinguish yourselves from the other author. Um,
Yes.
and I saw, but I did find several interviews that you had done that had been posted out there, and that's where I kind of cheated to learn a little more about you on all that. And are you on social media? Do you do Facebook, any of those other things as well?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at Lynda Williams _ author. And then I'm on Facebook as Lynda Williams. I'm on Blue Sky. Oh, Blue Sky handles are tricky.
Yeah, I know.
I can't. You'll find me under Lynda Williams if you search it on Blue Sky, but they're unnecessarily long handles.
Yeah, and trying to get through all the political stuff that's out there on all these things these days is always a challenge for an author
Certainly,
to
yes.
stand out and stuff. So I got a gnat flying around my head here. Um, well, we're at about an hour. So was there anything else that you wanted to cover or talk about?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
No, I appreciate you being on the show. Hopefully, maybe, I don't know if you'll be going to BoucherCon. We're planning on trying to go to BoucherCon in October. I know Mickey will probably be there.
Okay.
That's more mystery crime, but still a great event to go to and get a chance to meet a lot of authors. So since you live in the area, it might be worthwhile. But if you do, hopefully we'll get a chance to say hello.
I'd like that.
If we make it a possible, hoping for good weather towards the end of October. You were telling me, well, it could be really nice, could be bad, just like Colorado. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show, and we'll send you an email after the show with a link to it for the YouTube recording. And best of luck with you on your next one. When your next book is ready to come out, maybe we'll look at having you back on the show again.
I'd love that. Thank you so
Yep.
much.
Thank you, Lynda. Good night. Okay, everyone. Thanks very much. Appreciate you watching tonight. Next week we have. Oh, and I usually write this down, and I forgot to do that. But it's KT Angelheart is going to be my guest, and it's going to be on Tuesday, and it'll be at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. So we will have her on as well, and then we'll have a little break for a little while as we get through all the holidays coming up. So, but thank you. Take care, and we will see you all next week.